Thank you.
I thought it was me, but something more important.
Just not to be
And what colour?
imposing upon you.
Well, I went to Berlin and she said, I said,
I'll give it to Helen. I'll give it to Peter. No.
okay.
Thank you for hosting us. Thank you for hosting us.
You're welcome. Yes, and a few others. And a few others.
Today, we take my rest. Have you also put in the work? Have you all know of the work?
Right.
We haven't been involved at all. In fact, we knew very little about it.
We know Alex.
And people who have looked better, which we know a bit more now. She's very young.
You will stay in your family. You don't think it's your I need a young one that can turn off the voice on my phones. Anybody who knows that?
Sulla macaroni, frontes, carne grasas, tumba, volcasi. Remember, the Greek school, if you don't take all those years, is the shops, the factory place near our house, next to the Italian house.
Yes, but also this is Nelson Publishing. We used to pay. But if one of them would say 2 minutes, hello, you came from York and
He was a candidate in the general election, but he didn't win.
Essex and all that. Anyway, they deserve at least a word
used to
here or there, because I'm going
I used to be more
give
important, but not
the
these days.
chance to all the members of the
don't want to
Diaspora
be my
Centre
star.
Trust.
No, I love to.
there.
You would too?
That's where
During the reception, maybe.
I stood for Parliament twice under Harold Wilson.
There's something here.
I was a
and
GP
something
magistrate
there.
for probably the only court you've ever heard of, Bow Street. City of Westminster, where we are here.
My two colleagues from King's
A few other things.
is Dr. Jeffrey Crowell.
Nothing very important.
Come and meet.
Why? Why was
Ναι, το γίνει. Εν όλοι τους εκεί, έμπορφε να Dr. Sender.
Oh, we know each other, yeah.
What happened to your...
You got back in.
Mrs. Evelina
Oh, hi, I'm
Roussou
Peter.
is the
Margaret's
chair
nephew. Hi.
of the Diaspora
Yeah, glad to-
Trust
glad
now.
to-
Yes, that was lovely.
And she's going to start the proceedings under Dr. Maria Roussou in a minute.
Somewhere
Dr. Jeffrey Crowell has replaced Dr. Patricia Metcalfe, with whom we started the Greek Diaspora Archives. You are out,
Yeah.
as you will see. And Dr. Robin Oakley is the first person who started in Oxford research about Cypriot migration in the UK. And he has the first record certificate, but he's the person who wrote May I introduce colleagues? I'm sorry, Robin, because we won't have the chance later on, I think we are under pressure. I would like to introduce Peter Edwards, Margaret's nephew, who did a very good degree in English and is now an assistant at Parliament to one of the MPs. But Margaret was very, very proud of him, and he is the one who was there in the last difficult moments of life. So we thank him for rushing from work to be with us today.
Thanks for such a great event. Location as well. Here to learn a bit more tonight. Oh, no, right, I'm Peter. Oh, right, and have you met the rest of the family behind me?
Okay, King's College
Anne's husband, Derek.
So do you run the centre, or is that one of your colleagues?
No, I'm in the fundraising.
Okay. Yeah. Very different job.
Yes.
And are you going to do a speech or say as well? Yeah. I'll take my seat.
I've just informed Well, in the oil store, there is a picture.
House of Problem.
Houses of Problem. That's why.
Council of the Cyprus High Commission, and I would like to welcome you to the Friends of the High Commission on behalf of the High Commissioner, who will be with us shortly. He has another event to attend with his Greek colleague, and they will both join us at around 7 o'clock. Thank you for coming to this very interesting, I believe, event, which initiates the launching of an archive for Greek and Cypriot migration. It's been a very long and adventurous process in terms of research, but the colleagues from King's College will tell you more about this, and the High Commission will also report on his remarks later on. So now I would just like to introduce you to Mrs. Dr. Evelina Roussou, Chair of the Diaspora Centre Trust, who will be the chair of the panel until Mr. Roussou comes, with who we are expecting really soon. Thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoy our event.
Thank you. I would also like to welcome you all to this evening and thank you, really thank you for joining us to share and celebrate the work of the Greek Diaspora Archives. I'm hugely honoured to have been a chair for the past 4 years. I am proud, I'm very humbled and very inspired by the enthusiasm and dedication of my colleagues, and especially Dr Maria Roussou. This has been a project that has been running for a long time. There was such a wealth of materials there that we wanted to make it accessible to everybody. We were trying really hard to find a way to make it accessible to everybody. You will see there were photos, there were interviews, manifestos from Greeks and Cypriots all over the world, and unless we did something with this material, we digitized it, there was no way that would be accessible unless somebody would go to King's College. And for that reason, we are extremely grateful to King's College that they allowed us to have this room so that we could keep all these sources that were collected during the years. This evening, the program is divided into 3 parts, and there will be three speakers. You will get the chance to find out a lot more. I perhaps am the person who, probably the proudest, probably the person who deserves the less credit in this process. I've been here to oversee, but my colleagues have worked so incredibly hard. Dr. Roussou has been coming and going from Cyprus all these years, and she is perhaps one of the most inspiring women I've met. And I think it is Maria's enthusiasm that kept us going, if I'm honest. She has an infectious enthusiasm, and I'm sure those of you who know her well, I'm sure you will agree with me. Also, they have been, everybody who sits around this table and other colleagues that they were not able to join us. One of them is Mr. Pavlos Pavlidis. Pavlos took on the project of, in fact, digitizing the materials. For the most part, he did it on a voluntary basis. He was living in London, he finished his studies, and while he was trying to build his career, he dedicated a lot of time, he spent a lot of time at King's College trying to digitize all the materials that we've got. So now we are in the position to be here and be able to share all this with you.
Yes. Thank you, Evelina. Before I say any other word, I want to make a dedication. I owe this dedication to a man who inspired me with his simplicity, ευγένεια και αγάπη για τον ελληνισμό της Διασποράς. His love and dedication to everything Greek, but especially to migrant Greeks all over the world. And that's Konstantinos Levendis. With his wife, Edme Levendis, and we thank you for being here with us, Mrs. Levendis. We very much appreciate your presence. It's Konstantinos who started this work. With his contribution through the AGM, the A.G. Levendis Foundation at Birmingham University in 1990, this project would never have started, neither finished, because his support has continued all along. I'm going to say thank you towards the end of this event to a few more people, but please allow us now to say a big thank you to Mrs. Levendis and Konstantinos Levendis, the late Konstantinos Levendis, whom we lost very early, but his memory has lived with us, and to him I dedicate my archive. To him I dedicate today's event. Thank you to the Levendis Foundation, and we would like you to take this with you, Mrs. Levendis, as a small, very simple thank you to him and to all the family, but especially to him and you and your children.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be very brief with my presentation because pictures talk for me. So since you have a handout with a kind of a description, the overview of the project and the rest of it, I will run through Alex. Could you please do it for me?
Sorry.
Yes, there you are. You can all find the collection now at King's College London, and we owe it to Dr. Patricia Methuen and Mrs. Margaret Dees that the archive collection is now deposited there and catalogued there. Quite a bit of it is also digitized, thanks to Pavlos Pavlidis and my colleagues there, Kate O'Brien, Dr. Jeff Crowell, who is here with us today, and a few others in the office, Diane and Leanne, and everybody really has been wonderful in terms of helping for the cataloging and some digitization. Why the Europeana sign? Think culture. This is Europe's biggest project of digitized material, and we have a link because we are members of the Europeana project. We've participated in their meetings, we have digitized material on their websites, and we have prepared more. Very soon that will also come up and be on their websites. We started with a donation from a very important family. Important because it started from the small village of Lissos in Paphos district, Cyprus. And the name of the man, the name of the boy really, was Kostas, Konstantinos Fitidis. As a young boy of 8, he was taken by the Turks who invaded the village, and he was soon in Smyrna working as a servant boy in a big pasha home. Unfortunately, there was an illness going round, and the boy of that family died, of the Turkish family. So little Kostas was thrown out of the door overnight because they thought he contracted the illness and he passed it on. And that was the beginning of a very, very important journey. He traveled all alone to Egypt, Alexandria, and from Alexandria, walking of course, he arrived in Egypt, and from Alexandria he boarded a boat to California, where everybody was going looking for gold. But there was no gold in California, so he heard about gold in Johannesburg. So he was on a boat again. And as a young man, in the main street of Johannesburg, he started his first Coca-Cola drinks or something of that kind in 1895. That was the first picture given to me when Roxani Fididis, his great-granddaughter, gave me this picture and said, that was my great-grandfather. And it started with an invitation to talk at the Cypriot Brotherhood of Johannesburg. It was a revelation for me. And that's what made me, as Evelina said, and I apologize to my colleagues for really bothering them for so many years, but the journey started there in 1991 in South Africa, the first overseas field work. I was also impressed with the Cypriot communities of Britain. Of course, I started the field work in Britain since I was a lecturer at the British University. This correspondence, it's an envelope, but it's a very telling envelope in 3 languages: French, a little Greek, and Arabic Turkish, Old Turkish. 1902. And then Professor Paraskevopoulos, NASA, from USA to Bloemfontein, South Africa, where he set up NASA's fieldwork area. Who gave it to me? A young boy of 17 in 1991, Christos Ioannidis, who collected it when an old man from Kythira talked to him about his friend, Professor Paraskevopoulos of NASA. And we moved to New York, or rather USA. Karaburnu was a very small village near Smyrna. This constitution of Karaburnu rebuilt. It was destroyed, by the way. The village was destroyed to ashes in 1922 when Smyrna was turned to ashes, or the Greek part of Smyrna. And these people moved to the US. In Baltimore, Maryland, they rebuilt their village in terms of neighborhoods of Karaburnians. And I met one of them as a curator of the Washington Museum of Folk Art, and that's when she talked to me about her village. Who are you? She said. I said, I'm a Cypriot. Oh, well, I'm a Karaburnian, he said. Do you know where it is? Of course I didn't know. And the story unfolded at that moment, and she gave me this constitution and introduced me to a big family of Karaburnians who have rebuilt their life in the diaspora. Greeks from the Ionian side. London in 1950. In this picture of the Cypriot Brotherhood, we have ex-President Spyros Kyprianou at the far right. He was taking part in celebrations for the Greek Independence Day. It's the time, and it's telling really of how Greek the Cypriots felt abroad. They always linked themselves with the Greeks of every community they settled, from Punta Arena in Chile to St. Petersburg in Russia, to, of course, all the cities of South Africa where they found themselves, and North Africa, in Egypt, Libya, etc., but of course Nigeria and the Golden Coast, where we will hear later the A.G. Leventis Foundation prospect. Who has contributed material? Everybody, all of you. Amongst you today, there are people who helped, volunteered, contributed material, and we thank you publicly. These 2 youngsters, the man part of the British Army, a member of the British Army, a young man from the village of Katodris, near Vavatsinia. We have people from Vavatsinia here, and we have people from Lefkara. the area of the Lefkara Lakes. It started in her living room when I first said, I'm interested in your stories. And she said, yes, of course. And here is the whole lot of material I have for you. She was the lollipop lady of the nearby school. And she unfolded her story. That's how the project on lace history started. The people who were left behind. Savas and Eli Christoforou from Liverpool gave us lots of very old photographs that shows the Karpas Peninsula in its special form of dressing, and it's of course the people left behind. The young men immigrated to support their sisters, to marry them off, and before they left, they all made sure there was a picture for the mother, that mother that was left behind. We will speak about mothers and sisters and wives a little more. Insights and significance. Well, the project tries to shed light on the progress of these immigrant communities by documenting the impact of the diaspora experience on both their host countries and their motherland. How difficult it is to have two countries, to have two motherlands really. A lot of the interviews speak about their identity. A lot of the interviews speak about interculturalism. And this is what gives us their unique insight. I want to stop here for a minute. I want to treasure the vision, the importance of mothers, the importance of women in diaspora. As a very important priest of the Greek diaspora in England said, Hierotheos Kikotis, it's women who managed to organize this community in London and elsewhere. It's women who supported their men and stood by them in difficulties. And here is a young girl whose life was a life of diaspora, moving around. Mrs. Avgi Levendis, Konstantinos Levendis' mother, with her brothers at a young age in Larnaca. These years of carefree life have gone. She married Mr. Christodoulos Levendis, and she found herself in Africa, in various places. And she struggled with all the difficulties there. But then the Levendis family has built up their enterprises in Africa, in Paris, in London, and have been the support of Greek diaspora all along. We thank them again. But it's this woman and a few others that made sure we all could enjoy the benefits of being together as communities. The result, the Hellenic Centre of London, where we would like to have a copy of the digitized archive. I will run through these very important photos that were given to us. And it's Margaret Dees that said, "This can't stay in your cupboard, Maria. You've got to put them somewhere." And in 2004, Margaret Dees and Dr. Patricia Methuen gave me the unique opportunity of putting the Greek Diaspora Archives at King's College London. Stopping at Venezuela, for those who cannot read Greek, it was sent to me a few years ago. The Greek children there learning Greek by phone. They sit on the phone and they have a teacher who teaches them one-to-one. But they learn and they keep language and culture together. And it shows because the picture in Baltimore I took in 1996. You can see the kids dressed up in their Orthodox gowns and following the Greek flag. And on the right, it's a donation from Mrs. Helen Papanikolas of Utah, 1930s, celebrating a christening. It was an important event to do christenings when once a year a priest was going round the little villages of Utah. Armenian Philhellenes, they wanted to celebrate the 25th of March, the Independence Day, and they did celebrate with us. Commonwealth of Australia, a rich place for Greeks. They have really created communities everywhere, including little villages outside Adelaide. Very important people. Some people, presidents of local committees and higher positions in politics, quite a few MPs, they moved up. When they went, they had great difficulty to survive the very first years. Helen Vlastu Long, born in Bayswater, London, where her family migrated from Chios Island in 1922. Generation after generation, they managed to prosper again. Helen, an author herself, have been awarded many awards for her writings, donated all her books, especially the ones written as experiences of the Second World War. And we had General Charles de Gaulle being her boss. She knew French as well. She donated material about the Morphopoulos collection from the British and Victoria and Albert museums. She gave us quite a lot of stuff that is now donated to King's for every researcher to look at. Thanks again to Margaret Dees and Patricia Methuen and all the colleagues that helped after them. This woman, a teacher in Egypt, but also the mother of 2 British Cypriots, very important to the beginnings of diaspora. They came to me in Birmingham and they said, here's £10 from me to buy a good tape recorder. Both of them. And it was really important. It wasn't the £10, it was the fact that they appreciated it was an important piece of research and had to be done. And why I did it? Alex and Sophia, are you around? Sophia, can you please stand up? The only 2 specimens of the younger generation here, Sophia and Alex Roy, Greek Cypriot kids and British kids too. Alex now a student at Edinburgh University and Sophia preparing with an A in English. Well done, Sophia. Are here with us, helping us today, and they will present. And it's to them and all the children and grandchildren of our diaspora that I donate again this archive. Not only to the children of the Levendis family, whom we appreciate for learning their Greek, but to all of you, Sophia, whether you know a little Greek or you love the Greek history and you are studying classical studies now. We thank you for taking up the lead. And I hope one day you will work on my archives. Thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody. invite Dr. Robin Oakley, the person who was, in a way, the best teacher for me, because he's the one who taught me there is such a thing as Cypriot migration records. He's the first person who did research on Cypriots, and from him, quite a few other researchers followed, as his students actually. Professor Flogan Diaz, Professor Sarah Lambury,
yes.
and quite a few others.
Yes.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay.
The floor is yours. Or the top Yes, sorry. It's this way.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to come here and speak with you. I'll just try to be a little bit brief because we've got quite a few other speakers. But Maria had approached me recently and asked me to become involved with her very enterprising work on the Greek Diaspora Archives. And the reason she did so was the reason she's just explained, which is that quite a long time ago now, basically in the 1960s, and a little bit afterwards, I was involved in undertaking research into the origins of the migration of people from Cyprus, Greek and Turkish Cypriots from Cyprus to Britain, and settling in London and around Britain, mainly after the war, in the period after the war, but also extending into the pre-war period. And Maria said, you must have archives, you must have materials. And I do, and I did, because I've donated them now to King's College. They're not huge, but Maria insists they're very interesting, and so that's how I come to be here. After I undertook that work, my career took me in many other different directions, so I'm not directly involved in this sort of work now, and indeed I'm retired, and very much retired now. I'm a sociologist by background, but Maria has drawn me back and asked me both to donate the materials, but also to come this evening just to say a few words about the work I did and the sort of materials that I was using. So the way I became involved was because in the 1960s I was doing a PhD, a doctoral thesis as a sociologist, and did so on the subject of Cypriot migration to Britain. There's quite a long story how I became involved in this, which is how I worked as an archaeologist in Greece and learned to speak then Greek and so on, learned a lot about it. Anyway, by a slightly complicated route, I landed up becoming very interested in this issue and the whole experience of Greek Cypriots and Cypriots generally in coming to Britain and settling. And I was living in North London, in Islington at the time, where people were coming. So that was the context very much was, as I say, that I was doing that research. It was mainly focusing on the post-war migration, but I also found the origins of the migration and people settling here, especially in London, from the 1920s and 1930s onwards, very interesting. There was then, and even now, relatively little research undertaken on this history of migration and settlement, going way back. And as I've already said, Maria felt there was a need to make publications and other data accessible and deposit materials in the archive. And I'll say just a little bit more now about that work, and I'll come to that last question, other possible actions, things that could be done to perhaps build on or extend the work that I was doing, and some things have been done. But the scope of my research, as I said, was looking at the factors giving rise to that migration. Why did it occur, particularly starting in the 30s, but especially after the war? Its demographic and its socioeconomic character, who came, what were their jobs, what were their backgrounds, and so on. Where did they live in Britain, the settlement patterns, why did they live in those areas, how did they set up the community and get it organised. And also I was very interested in how the pre-war settlement of the pioneers, and Maria's mentioned some examples like lace merchants and so on, but other pioneers, how did what they started to do then begin to shape what happened after the war and the way people lived and developed the community? So Maria, I think, has been particularly interested as far as the archives are concerned, and what are the sources of data and information. And she's been talking about and illustrating very much the sorts of sources and materials that exist that can be brought into the archive. In my case, the materials that I was able to use then were the fact that there were some very comprehensive statistics published by the Cyprus government, by the colonial government, on population in Cyprus and on migration. And of course there was the British census data, and these are sort of major sources of statistics, and there were other kinds of UK official statistics like employment data, and some of these had classifications, for example by birthplace, which enabled one to identify the situation of Cypriots, born groups, or even Cypriot ethnic identity groups in Britain. And then there was a range of other sorts of sources, which, for example, the Greek Cypriot newspapers, especially in the post-war period, such as Tovima, which I think was founded in 1939, 1940, by Floyer Anthies's father, he was the editor. And then there were other newspapers being started up. So they often contained a lot of information about what was going on in the community, as well as information about Cyprus. One could, and I did, a fair number of informal personal interviews, and that is obviously a great source of information. And at that time I was, as I said earlier, living in North London, in Islington, and tried as much as I could, having, like Maria, being trained as an anthropologist, to get involved in the life of the community. And so those are the sorts of sources of information which I was using at that time, and it is some of those materials which Maria now has, or Jeff Brow, who will be explaining to us soon, has now in the archives. This is not, there we are. But it was quite interesting, and this Maria has been interested in this, the sources for the pre-war period, because some of these were quite different. For example, the colonial reports for Cyprus, which I was able to obtain from the British Library's, it's the National, Jeff, what is it? The Kew Gardens. It's the National Records Office.
National Archives.
Yeah, National Archives were a source for quite a lot of interesting materials. The colonial reports for Cyprus, I was able to access them there. Of course, again, the early population censuses from the 1921 and 1931 had information, and I'll show a slide about that in a minute. Very interestingly, through the National Archives, I was able to track down ship passenger records in the 1930s coming from the Mediterranean to London, keeping records of individuals. Unfortunately, I'd have to be able to bring a slide of those, but I've deposited them in the King's Library and I haven't had time to go and do something like a photograph of them. But I know, Maria, you felt those were very interesting. Yeah. They are giving the names and occupations and backgrounds of people who travelled on the ships, of Cypriots who travelled on the ships in the mid-30s. There's not a huge amount of them, but they give an unusual and surprising snapshot. Then there were registers of the Greek Orthodox Cathedral, which of course continued later. One needed to be able to identify who were the Cypriots amongst the mainland or other Greeks who were participating there, but the birth, marriage and death records, for example, were kept there. Street directories is another source for London, for example, and I'll show a little map a little bit later of where Cypriots, and particularly Cypriot businesses, were located. So by knowing the names and trying to guess which are the Cypriot names, one could use those sorts of sources. There were reports from the Cypriot government office in London from that time. There was a well-established office, and it was keeping an eye. It was keeping an eye on the Cypriots and managing the control of migration, passports, all those sorts of things, welfare of Cypriots in London, and several reports were written, at least 2 on their request. The reports were undertaken about the condition of Cypriots living in London. And so there are remarkable sources here, which I think could be more could be found, more use could be made of them, people could go back to them, because please bear in mind, I was looking at these 30, 40, 50 years ago, and I have some records and I put them in the King's College Library archive, but I think they would be very interesting for some people to revisit. And of course there are the personal reminiscences of early settlers. I was able to use those. I think you were very interested in the fact that I spent quite a bit of time in the company of a very interesting early migrant, Mr. John Stace, Yanni Stace, who ran the White Tower restaurant. Anybody remember or heard of the White Tower restaurant in Percy Street? You know? Yes, he died, and then I think his wife continued after that. But before he died, way back, I spent quite a bit of time there, and he told me very much his life story, and very interesting talking to him about the very earliest days in London. And I've got several letters and things from him which are in the archive there. I wish I'd done so much more, but they are small pieces which I think are interesting, you know. So there are these sorts of things, and you've shown photographs and all sorts of things. I think there is so much that could be done with more efforts, with getting some more people interested and so on. I mean, that's something for the future. Let me just go quickly through. I've just put in here one or two slides of sort of with a bit of information, statistical information. You see already there the censuses from Britain was showing the presence of Cyprus-born people. I think you can see that between 1931 and 1951, the migration had started really just after the war properly. But before that, you see, already in 1931, one has 734 there, and those are definitely almost all Cypriots from Cyprus. See, I think if we go back to 1911 and we see that most of there are 186 in England and Wales, and they're males and females. I think a lot of those might have been some colonial families and so on, because there always would have been a small number of British, I don't know, colonial families or troops and so on, where the families might have been, because women really did only begin to come along with the men, although they played an important role, as you were saying, but the very earliest migrants, most of those who came before the war, would have been men. So I think we see that reflected in those figures on the right-hand side, that suddenly women start being very much part of the migration. But you can see there how also the early Cypriot migrants, and indeed all, have been highly concentrated in London. Let's just look at the next slide on that. You see, if we can get that to come. Here in London, this is 1931. Already we are seeing that in 1931 there is quite a significant little population here in London, and it's in the St Pancras Holborn area around Soho and Camden, and this is where it's all starting, as I'm sure many of you know, and St Marylebone, Paddington a little bit south of the river, and people dispersed a bit, but highly concentrated in this Soho and then Camden area in those very earliest years. I mentioned earlier about using the street directories. You don't need to see this map in any great detail, but all I wanted to show was that if I took a map of sort of the Soho area and early in the beginnings of that north part of inner London, using street directories and identifying the Cypriot businesses, one could just make a little map of where the businesses were and how they were concentrated in certain little localities and streets. And that would have been a very vibrant little community at that time, with people closely in touch. And if one adds to pictures like that, photographs, personal reminiscences and things like that, one begins to be able to reconstruct something of the life of the community in those very early years. But a lot more would need to be done, and could be done, I think, if people wanted to do that. And maybe it's, I do hope it's something that might come out of the archive in due course. Yes, let's just see. Yes, I just listed a few examples here of the sorts of Cypriot businesses that are in the street directories. And you can see cafes and restaurants are beginning to grow already. By 1930 there are 5, by 1939 there are 20. Tailors are some of the earliest ones, hairdressers, shoe repairers, you probably predict what they would be. And I think what is very interesting there, and I wrote an article about this quite early on, is how through setting up these sorts of businesses, the migrants themselves could pretty much sort of meet their own needs. They could both have shops and cafes and businesses where they could get the services they need, but also those services enabled them to sell, to earn money and work. Of course, this was before the dressmaking industries and things were established. They were working probably mostly for Jewish-owned or other dressmaking businesses at this time. The dressmaking businesses started much more after the war. So it was just the beginnings of a little community which could provide for itself in quite significant ways and support itself. And that developed quite strongly after the war in the 1950s and 1960s, and then lots more businesses started, and the whole thing grew a lot more in ways that I think still needs to be documented. There's a great book to be written on the history of all of this. Let's just try and finish off quickly. What have I got? I can't go backwards, can I? On the publications one, let me just say, I wish I'd held that. A little handout has been given of some of the articles that I wrote. You've got that in your papers. The thesis, PhD thesis, which I wrote, which was book length, wasn't published formally, but I had it retyped and everything, and it is actually on my website, and I've given on that bit of paper the address of my website. So the whole thesis is a book, and it is now fully accessible to anybody who's interested on that website. I think, when Maria approached me and said we would take your materials into the archive, I looked at all my files and I found that at least 2 things I hadn't finished writing up, so she did stimulate me to sit down, despite being sort of 30 or 40 years away from it, to sit down and just finish off some pieces that I had prepared, and in particular I prepared an article on the paper just trying to provide an overview of what the circumstances of Cypriots were in London between the wars in those very early years. And I am going to put that on my website. In fact, I was hoping to have done it by today, but I haven't, because I was having trouble trying to edit my website earlier today. But I will put this little article on, which Maria's seen. So there are a variety of sources there, and you have information on that. And let's come back, thank you. What else could be done? My last comment, really. I've said some of these things already. I do hope that more, Maria's interest in the materials and the interest represented by people in this room in that early history of Cypriots coming to Britain, that this could be expanded. One could find students and people. There are a lot of things. There are other researchers who've done work on this. You mentioned some, and Florian Pierce. A number of people have done other bits of work since, but not a lot. I do hope that in the archive it will be possible to collect some of those other materials which are relevant and connect with any other archives which may have got some materials, because there may be some. And Jeff, you were saying one of your specialisms is linking archives, and I suspect there are probably some other materials in other archives about the early history of Cypriot migration and settlement to Britain. Obviously getting some more research done, we've just talked about that, to really delve into that history would be good, and perhaps put together some little booklet which could be done through the GDA. Where can those materials and sources be found? Possibly some documents, some of the articles could be reprinted and made available if necessary, but of course these days it's pretty much on the internet. And one thing that we have talked in 1 or 2 meetings with the archive about is young people and encouraging interest in that, and perhaps there is some interest in that, and perhaps encouraging teachers, especially in sort of London areas where young Cypriot people and others with interest in this live. They could perhaps do a bit of research. One could produce a little bit of information, tell them about how you can get it, how you can study this, and how kids could talk to their grandparents and things like this, and try and compile information. Even hold the archive some seminar, perhaps for teachers, to try and encourage them to do this kind of thing. I don't know. These are just some thoughts I had, but I hope that you'll be able to make some use of this kind of material. So it's just an example of one little bit of work I was involved with, which I fed into the archive, and I do hope it will be useful. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much. Can I ask my colleague from King's College London, the person who actually saw the archive going online? He did it. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. Now for the most challenging part of the evening, getting this thing to work.
It's in your documents.
Yeah. It's working. Great stuff. Well, I'm going to speak very briefly, just to introduce King's College London Archives and to welcome you all to the archives, and to come and use this magnificent collection which Maria has been instrumental in putting together. And come soon, visitors. At King's Archives we manage about 5 million documents, and lots of them electronic documents as well as physical pieces of paper. Artifacts as well, so we don't stop at paper. As Nicole Kidman found just 2 weeks ago when she came and saw us, in preparation for her play on the West End, Photograph 51. So people often are surprised to learn that archives contain a huge diversity of material, but it's the sort of diversity that's represented in the GDA. Once again, I'm going to try and turn the pages. Yes, there we go. So what do archivists and what does our archive do? Well, we look after essentially the corporate memory of King's College and other institutions, but we're also an archive that takes deposits of material across a whole range of disciplines: science, medicine, technology and the arts. And we're collecting all the while, and that's really the fun part of the job. We tour around the country hunting out new archives in lofts, in basements, in sheds, very obscure locations. Just last year I was in rural Dartmoor, to give an example, scrabbling around in the loft space of a dead admiral who invented the underwater ejector seat. So it's that sort of job. And really it's that sort of diversity that's mirrored in the collection. We also present all this material to the public, so we're instrumental in cataloguing the collections, providing it for researchers, and researchers come and visit us in our reading room off the Strand. We're on the 3rd floor of the Strand building, which is the ugliest building in the Strand, if ever you get lost there. Just find the ugliest building, come to the 3rd floor, we're open and welcoming in normal opening hours. And if you're very good to us, we'll provide you with a nice fresh cup of coffee as well to help with the researchers. So we do a lot more besides. So we support a lot of teaching, and we do a lot of public engagement work. And these are some examples of websites that we manage. So on the left-hand side, a bit small for you to see, but if you visit our website, kcl.ac.uk/archives, there are links to all this. So physical and online exhibitions. We've created plays before now about different subjects, apps and other sorts of technology. The Serving Soldier is a website on the right-hand side there, where we digitised about 30,000 different documents relating to the history of warfare, and I'm sure that there's Cypriot material on there, so do take a look. The website in the middle is AIM25, and we started AIM25 at King's, and it is a consortium of 150 cultural organisations in London, the archives. It includes all the main learned societies, scientific societies, universities, and it enables researchers from around the world to cross-search all these archives at the same time. And I'm sure a search on there will yield a lot of very interesting archives relating to Cyprus and Cypriots around the world, not only at King's College, but in many other organisations and institutions. And AIM25 goes from strength to strength. It gets about 1 million visitors every month from around the world. The furthest location we've had a visitor from doing research has been Pitcairn Island in the Pacific. I'm waiting for Antarctica. We're not quite there yet, so when we get Antarctica, we know we've cracked it. So this is actually the homepage of the archive, Greek Diaspora Archive at King's. And you can click on it now, if you have internet access, and you can scroll through the archive, and you can look in detail at the collections in there. And this is one example here from the audio-visual material section of the archive. So if you want to come and view it, just drop us a line, come in and visit us, and you're more than welcome. So I'd just like to finish up by saying a few words of thanks to Maria and her team, to Patricia, who I believe is at the back of the room there, who's really been instrumental in helping Maria put things together in our archive. I'd like to thank Pete Vox and the Images Company, who do a lot of work in putting together the catalogue system that we use, and also in his last-minute help in publishing the paper catalogue, which Maria has an example of here. And that was really sterling work at the last minute. And finally, Pavlos, who can't make it today, reiterating what others have said, he did a magnificent job for about 18 months in coming in and working through this collection. And Pavlos is not only, we acknowledge his hard work, but also he's become a friend as well to the archive team. So come and use the archive.
I invite Dr. Patricia Methven, please, to join us here. This is a time that we will hear a few words about a great friend and a person who contributed a lot to the archives, either there or here with me. Yes, Patricia Methven, Dr. Methven, has accepted the archives without knowing really the extent or the content very much. But she took Margaret's words, and maybe my smile, and she accepted it in 2004. And then she had lots and lots of patience all through these years, till 2015, to see it online. Patricia, thank you very much. Could I ask the Cyprus High Commissioner, please, to join me here to thank Patricia for a very good piece of work that she did as the director of the archives and the whole of information systems at King's. It's great. Thank you. Yes, thank you. There are flowers for everybody, I must say, but they are waiting for you outside. So as to save a few minutes, I want to say that I would like Patricia to help me here in giving a special thanks before we hear about Margaret to his sister and the whole of the family for supporting her all along, but especially during her last months and days. Anne, we thank you for coming. We would like you to join us here, and I would like my colleague, Evelina, the chair of the Diaspora Centre Trust, on behalf of all of us, with Patricia's help, to pass on the memorial plaque in Greek and English. Would you like to read it, Evelina, please?
Margaret Mackenzie Days. Ευχαριστούμε. The Diaspora Centre Trust thanks you for loving our Greek language and culture and for supporting the work of Dr Maria Roussou for the Greek Diaspora Archives, now based at King's College London. Your memory will be with us and subsequent generations forever, and wherever you are, because as Pericles of London Golden Age of Athens said, andrών επιφανών πάσα γητάφος.
Anne is the only sister, the only sibling that Margaret has. And Anne has been with Derek. Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Anne.
Can I just say thank you to everyone for inviting me and the family here today. We feel very honoured to attend. Thank you also for this beautiful plaque, which I'm sure my sister would have been delighted to receive and would have been very pleased to know that her activities and her contribution has been appreciated. We shall endeavour, I'm sure we shall ensure that the plaque remains in the family and we shall be enjoying taking it home today. Thank you very much.
With some flowers for her grave that are waiting there for you. Thank you. My teacher, the very first teacher I had in London when I arrived in 1978, and a very great friend of Margaret is, to just tell us a few words about her life and contributions to academia, about their studies in Cambridge. Would you like to talk from there, Margarita? Would you feel happier here?
Oh, I can do either.
Yeah, maybe there. Just touch the button.
Right.
Lovely. Okay.
Well, it's a great honour for me to be invited to speak on this occasion, and it's a great pleasure for me to speak about Margaret. Some years ago, Maria asked me whether I would be willing to work with her on translating a long poem. I didn't think I could do this, as I know no Greek. But I thought that my very close friend, Margaret Lees, might be willing. And she was. Margaret had read classics, gaining a first in her degree at Cambridge, and she specialised in literature. She used her knowledge of classical Greek to help her develop her knowledge and understanding of modern Greek, so that she had a reading knowledge of modern Greek, as well as speaking a few words as well, quite a few words. She loved ancient Greek culture, art and literature, and she had taught adults in evening classes about classical literature, arts and philosophy, and about Byzantium. And she had done this very successfully. And Margaret was admirably qualified for translating, because in addition to her knowledge of ancient languages, she also knew and read French and German, and was well aware of the importance of the connotations and associations of words. And she was meticulous in her use of English. She had recently retired from her day job in the civil service, and so would have time, as I thought, among all her other many activities which I could tell you about, but there is not time this evening. And she had many other activities. Among the writings translated by Maria and Margaret working together was the important long poem, Pentadactylus, My Son, by Claire Angelidis, who was then Minister of Education and Culture in Cyprus. This poem has many beautiful descriptions, and such descriptions present particular difficulties for translators. Other volumes are Young Man Seeks Position, Good References, by Louis Akritis, a novel about the experiences of a young Cypriot man looking for a job in Athens in the first years of the 20th century. And then again there is Nicholas Nikolaidis, the Cypriot. And this volume contains some of his short stories, poetry, and lyrical prose, as well as many photographs of the work he did as an artist. So valuable works and of great importance to the knowledge of Greek and particularly Cypriot culture. The small volume by Margaret, Some Aspects of Hellenism and Philhellenism with Diaspora Connections, includes a number of articles and translations, as well as some which she translated from German and from French. Margaret was invited to Nicosia many times, and she was a principal speaker on many prestigious occasions. And she spoke at one on John Keats and Cypriot poetry. But Margaret's contribution was not limited to working with Maria on translations. She became increasingly involved in the work of the Diaspora Centre. She undertook many practical tasks, such as collecting posts from the Hellenic Centre, and she lived in Earl's Court, and for later from King's College, ensuring that all new publications were notified to the appropriate bodies, chasing up subscriptions, a very forlorn task at times, and even storing in her bedroom a quantity of books which were for sale. She was also involved in helping to organise meetings, and she did that very well, of course. She served as treasurer, working with the accountant, paying in cheques and so on, presenting accounts at meetings. And she did this until 3 months before her death, when she was already not in good health. And another very important activity, as we have heard, was working with Maria in establishing the archive at King's College. In all her activities, Margaret was thorough and thoughtful, and she was fully committed to the success of the Diaspora Centre, of which, of course, she was a trustee from its inception. We have indeed lost somebody who has been of great value, which we all regret. I should like to add a few words about Maria. It was she who conceived the idea of the archive, and she has been indefatigable, quite indefatigable, in finding Greek communities throughout the world, in getting to know them, in collecting materials about them, finding out about their reasons for migrating and their experiences in leaving their original country and in their new country, as well as their links with their original homeland and its culture. She has spent many hours and been most energetic in sorting and digitizing records and in all that work, tasks in which Pavlos Pavlidis, alas unable to be with us today, has been an admirable colleague. This archive is now increasingly recognized as a valuable resource, not only for the Greek diaspora, as the evidence of the link with Europe is very clear, makes clear, but also for people in countries receiving migrants and their understanding of incomers. Thank you.
there's a young person who has been inspired by Margaret. It's not just me, many people have been inspired by her. And Sophia Roy loves music as much as Margaret, who was a member of the Orpheus Choir of London until the last year before her death. Sophia Roy has been in concerts where Margaret was singing. And Sophia Roy became a member of the Youth Choir of London. Here she is to sing something for Margaret's memory.
Good evening, everybody. This evening I will be singing Love Sickness from the opera Indian Queen by Persa. I attempt from love sickness to fly in vain, for I have myself my own fever, for I have myself my own fever and pain. I attempt from love sickness to fly in vain, for I am myself my own fever, for I am myself my own fever and pain. No more now, no more now, fond heart with pride no more swell. Thou canst not raise forces, thou canst not raise forces enough to rebel. I attempt from love sickness to fly in vain, for I am myself my own fever, for I am myself my own fever and pain. For love has more power and less mercy than fate, to make us see blooming, to make us see blooming, and love those that hate. I attempt from love sickness to fly in vain, for I am myself my own fever, for I am myself my own fever and pain.
I must, as an anthropologist, I can't keep it silent. I must say that I was so impressed with Sophia's Greek just 2 days ago, when I was, naturally, standing up to translate what Yaya was telling her in Greek. And Sophia said, "Εντάξει Yaya, θα το κάνω," in her perfect Cypriot Greek. Thank you, Sophia, for loving our culture. Thank you to Margaret, we said before, for loving our culture and language. And may I ask the ambassador of Greece, to give Sophia a very special book in ancient Greek classical studies from Margaret's collection, a very special collection of old books. Sophia.
Congratulations, we were all moved by your voice, and we deeply congratulate you for your efforts and for your success and for your charisma, and all the best for you.
And this is the time to say thank you to another young person. We said it's really for them that we all work, including young Achilles. I must say, I am impressed. But could I ask the Cyprus High Commissioner, please, and Alex Roy, who has done a lot of work for this PowerPoints, for all the technical stuff, but also for supporting me all along, teaching me how to use iPhone, etc., and iPad. Alex, please, come here. You will meet the Cyprus High Commissioner for the first time, but you will become friends. He is going to... This is a special ancient book again.
I'm supposed to have it. Let me say thank you. If you have this iPhone, I do, iPad, I don't, I don't have, I don't know. All these things. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is somebody called Stefanos Roussos around? Not yet. May I call upon Mrs. Leventis again? I'm sorry for having to bring you here. To pass on our thanks to a man who passed away, but all his life he has given the diaspora a lot of financial and moral support. He hosted actually the Diaspora Archives for 21 years in his back living room. He transformed that as a diaspora space and helped me to work through. This is Charlie of Finsbury Park. For Charlie, can I ask his niece, Andri Papamichael, please, to come and receive this thank you on behalf of the whole of his family. His son lives in America, his only child, a Cambridge graduate of mathematics. He couldn't come, but sends his best regards to all of us and to the Diaspora Archives at King's. This is to say thank you in appreciation for all his support for the 21 years of Greek Diaspora Archive that he had in his back room. Andri and Mrs. Leventis, could I ask you to still stay here? And you will be joined by two other women, Marilyn Panagi, please, and Evelina Dimopoulou, to say thank you to Andri this time, because Andri has contributed volunteering since 1978 to the archives. Andri is the mother of 3 children. She is the sister of 5 siblings. She is the grandmother of 6 grandchildren. And she taught them all Greek. Not that it's important, Jeff, to learn Greek, but if she can do it, and she did it very well, then we say bravo, Andri, for teaching all of them Greek. Thank you. And I want to thank Andri, but also behind a woman who achieves so much, there is a man, Evelina. Could you please call on Mr. Dimos Papamichael to join us here? Where is Marilyn? Marilyn, could you bring Mr. Dimos Papamichael here? And can I give this to Mrs. Leventis? And maybe you could read it for us, Mrs. Leventis, to say thank you to these 2 people who not only then, but even today, they played my taxi driver, my support in bringing the flowers, in finding this, in finding that, and they will even take me home tonight. So
You hope.
they have, yes, they have done a lot since 1970, when I first arrived in England and registered at the University of London. But since 78, they've been looking after a small boy of 3.5, my son, my only son. Konstantinos Pashiatis will receive the plaque of Charlie and Andri and Dimos we'll have the next one that Mrs. Levendis is passing on to you.
Mrs. Andri Papamichael and Mr. Dimos Papamichael, in appreciation of your support to the Greek Diaspora Archives, now based at King's College London. From all members and friends of the Diaspora Centre Trust and the Kendron Meleton Ελληνισμού της Διασποράς.
A little Greek at the end. Thank you all.
Everyone smiling?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And of course, I would like to thank all my other colleagues, the members of the Executive Committee of the Diaspora Centre Trust. I would like to call upon Professor Charles Sosu to help me, because it is, have we done well till now? Yes, we have. Could you please, Professor Sosu, remind us of a few names of the Executive Committee now, and I will help with previous committees. Could you call upon all our colleagues to come with us here, have a photograph together with the ambassadors of Greece and Cyprus, with Mrs. Levendis, with Mrs. Anne Edwards, with Mrs. Celeste Wright, and of course our colleagues here. Marilyn, yes.
I've already said it, so
Could you call? Helen Neal is not here. Where is she? Shall we? Yes. We will go over where the reception is for the photographs, but please come and take your thank you here. Helen Neal.
The first one is for
Evelina, come.
Evangelia Dimopoulou. Evelina, no?
Yes, both.
Hello, look the camera. Professor, please, thank you.
We are not very good with photographs.
This is for me.
Well, somebody will give me this.
Okay.
Robin, would you do me the favor to pass it on to Professor Sosu and Mrs. Marula Sosu, please. Mrs. Sosu has also been a member of the Executive Committee for many, many years. So this is for Professor Sosu and Mrs. Marula Sosu. Just, I think it's nicer to have it here and pass it on.
Mrs. Helen Neal.
Camera, please, 1 second.
And Marilyn Panagi.
Thank you. Before we...
There are some more, sorry. Dr. Margarita Rende. Dr. Robin Hockey. Mr. Evripidis Evriadis.
I don't deserve I don't really deserve this. I mean, so I'm in an awkward position.
And before we retire to the reception, I'd just like to say that Maria has been fantastic and stalwart in this effort with the archive, and I think it's now our opportunity to present a few things to her and thank her immensely.
Before I go from here, I say on your behalf, I think we must all thank Maria for the excellent organization, unbelievable organization this evening.
Well, since Achilleas is here and Sophia is here, I want to thank this man for taking on the project, and of course, Mr. Evriviadis. May I just say a quick word about our names for our English friends. Our High Commissioner is called Euripides. Our cultural attaché is called Achilles. My sister is called Hera, Zeus's wife, and my brother is called Sophocles. And quite a few of the diaspora people are called Ion, Roxani, Marcia, Greek and Latin ancient names, and lots of them. Alexandros Phididis, the barrister in Johannesburg. And what did I hear in Antofagasta of Chile? Kyrenia Tofalos, a lawyer in the middle of the desert where copper mines, etc. exist. Why? Because A. Tofalos from Arabiku left Larnaca on a boat and ended up in Antofagasta. But why these names, I asked myself in 1991, survived in the diaspora? Because we live in our past, we make our present more meaningful, and we want to pass it on to the future generations. To you, Achilleas, thank you for this, but to you as our cultural attaché, we will rely to pass the word to the younger generations.
You're very welcome. If we didn't believe in this, we wouldn't do it. It is a very serious effort.
Thank you.
I believe strongly that it will be a platform for future research and future contribution into the analysis of the history of the diaspora in terms of social, cultural, and so many other perspectives. So thank you very much for all the hard work you put in.
There are some flowers, Cypriot flowers. Can I pass this to you as well? Oh, thank you. Thank you. But there are some flowers for Achilleas, for Christophoros, here in the embassy,
yes,
for all our good colleagues who put on hours of work for the diaspora. So please join us. Evelina, do you think it's the time to call on everybody to have a drink with us?
Just a few.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Just a few words, because I was not here to welcome each and every one of you at the beginning. Just to go over there. What do you want me to do? I have to obey. I have to obey. Just very briefly, because you far be it from me to make a speech. Since I was not here to welcome you at the very beginning, it's a little bit awkward to have an event under the auspices and the person that is supposed to be welcoming you is not here. But very often in this city, I feel like a swan, graceful above water, but underneath pedaling like hell. And we came from an event together with my Greek colleague, my Greek homologue, Ambassador Konstantinos Bikas. We had a very important event in the House of Parliament, and we have something else after this as well. So we try to do it. Just to simply welcome you, and to really say that how much impressed all of us are to you, Mrs. Roussou, and to all the stakeholders. Far be it from me to name each and every one, because I will not, for sure, I will not get everybody right. Mrs. Levent is here, and so many others that are here. Tom Kiley from the British Museum, and so many others. To thank you. There really is a lot of work that has been done. I personally am further much more enlightened because I did not realize that this work has been going on for so many years. Like Achilles said, something that we can build on, and Mr. Oakley said, Dr. Oakley said that perhaps it will come out in a book, because it's our roots, it's our DNA, and we have to pass it on. And this is part of what we're trying to do here in the Cyprus High Commission, as I always say, not just a house, but a home. There's a difference between a house and a home, of the Homogenea here in London. So I think Boris Yeltsin compared London, being a metropolitan city, but you compare it to what Athens used to be to the Asian world. This is what London is now. That is his take. But it's a great pleasure to have you. Thank you very much for this wonderful event, more enlightened and enriched by the presentations. And now comes rewarding time with a little bit of glass of wine and whatever else our caterer will care to give you. So thank you very much.
I'm very sorry before the glass of wine. I must say thank you again to Anne Edwards and Derek, who invited me to Margaret's flat and asked me to take any Greek books that I liked from her very important collection of Greek books. A few items I have here, because some of them came from very early editions. The Ancient World by Clover, 1936. May I pass this to Dr. Oakley, please, with our thanks? And I'm sure one of your grandchildren, if not you, will read it one day.
Thank you.
And there is an Ancient Culture and Society, again an old edition, from Margaret's library. May I pass it on to Jeff? Thank you.
Are we ready?
Yes. Shall we all go for the drink? And then we can talk. Να βγάλουμε εδώ ή μέσα, κύριε Εδώ καλύτερα. Εμείς. Okay. But people can pass on to the drinks. Πολύ το θέλουμε, βέβαια. Join us on please, Celeste, to join us. Kings, you are the principal's office. Thank you for coming. I hope it is.
Thank you very much for coming.
Marilyn, Maria Sozu, Professor Sozu, Professor Sozu. We will you see, για δεν θέλετε να καθίσετε ή να είστε από πίσω. Πολύ καλύτερα. Μα Ευελίνα μου, καθίστε εσείς για να είναι από πίσω οι άλλοι, για να μας χωρέσει. Και εγώ θα είμαι μαζί σας. Ευελίνα μου, some people sit, and then others stand behind.
So we will balance boy, girl, boy, girl. Very, very important to have.
Alex, please come. Alex, please come here. Please come here. Please come here. Alex, come here. Leave it there. Leave it there so people can navigate. Yeah. Good. Ella Dimo. Ella Alex. Alex behind me. Alex, please behind me. Alex, do me the favor. Could we have Professor Paralambous, Professor Paralambous and our colleague from the Cyprus, from the museum, please? Ella, John, please come. Next to me.
Okay, lovely. Ready, please? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Taxi, thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yes, Maria, she is the lady. She's the driving force. Absolutely.
Just but without your support, without
Do you mind, Alex?
They shut it off so you don't have to flag. I can turn it off. I can turn it up again. Huh? I can turn it back. Wait, it might be the same. Oh yeah, yes, that would be a good background. Sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And probably I'll hold this because that makes my father very proud.
I think it takes a second, I've got to bear in mind.
But you make sure that my solar cells don't reflect that. Yeah, no, this is not going to come.
Oh, well, we could stand to one side.
One side, or let's go by the flag.
By the flag. Let's go by the flag. You've got some really heavy chairs.
Yes, they are very heavy.
Yes, they are indeed.
But I'm interested in what you're saying. I think there's any of those things there. Sorry, is it possible that we could just take a picture? Oh, yes. Do you want to? Thank you very much. To get out of the way.
Your left one. We hold this.
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
When you're ready.
Okay?
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Great pleasure. I will get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much. So how long have you been in this role? You just think?
Yes, that's really where the world
No, I think the great thing was getting the public involved again. He was so solid young man, so sensible.
She did.
olive tree. So it's Margaret and Maria, and this is from her olive tree. We did on the grave.
It's a lovely gift. I've never seen it. Yeah, you have been very generous. Thank you.
Almost everything.
Like a rose. Like a rose rose. Yeah, you've been very generous, I think, with the flowers. So I know.
Of course you have mommy and him here.
But I'm a big reader.
But Helen is here. Helen is somebody. You are I love her. It's so good to have you. Thank you, David, because I love these people. They are my Margaret, these three people here, and she deserves all the work we did.
Oh, she's going over the top.
All the work.
Good.
Ευχαριστώ.